Now, journalist Peter Hitchens has caused a stir this week after suggesting the English embrace their national identity and break away from the United Kingdom. Writing in the Daily Mail, Mr Hitchens said that English identity lives in millions of hearts and predicted that any manifesto with English independence in its agenda would comfortably win a general election. So what is English identity, and does it bear any similarity to Scottish and Welsh independence sentiments? Arlene, I'm kind of keen to come to you first on this. What do you make of this notion of kind of English independence?
Well, first of all, I think it's right that people should be proud of their Englishness. If you're English, you should be proud of that, just as I'm very proud to be Northern Irish. I think it's important that people have pride in who they are. But the lovely thing about being part of the United Kingdom is that I'm Northern Irish and British. I have that very strong tie with Scotland, Wales and England. And the United Kingdom is something that works and works very well in all its parts. It's not just about a transactional issue. I mean, Peter Hitchens talks about, England leaving the UK because we're the people that make all the money and therefore the rest of you can all go. I mean, that's not what it's about. It's about much more. It's about cultural ties. It's about emotional ties. It's about our identity as British citizens. So, I mean, this is Peter Hitchens being the contrarian. He's probably fed up listening to, as I am, Scottish nationalists and Irish Republicans talking about destroying the Union, talking about destroying Northern Ireland and trying to see the abolition of Northern Ireland and indeed having Scottish independence. So I understand why he's frustrated listening to all of that. But I mean, the answer is not for England to leave the United Kingdom. The answer is to have a stronger union.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm kind of curious about, and Paul, maybe you can help shed some light on this. Do you think there is an English identity in the same way that there's a very kind of strong Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish identity? Because to me, it feels like in England, it's a little bit more regional than kind of national.
No, I think there is, actually. I think there is a sense of being Englishness, of being English, a sense of Englishness, a sense of being proud of England. But what I think, Deanna, is that tends to exist much more in what you might call provincial England, small-town England, often working-class England, than it does in the fashionable cities where lots of people tend to take the view, we're citizens of the world and don't really feel any attachment to England. And in some respects, that's a contradiction, because often these same people will be more than happy to fan the flames of Scottish nationalism and Welsh nationalism, and you can understand why English people feel a bit left behind, because they see the cultural elites, if you like, indulge in these other nationalisms and saying, they're a force for good and how wonderful St Nicholas Sturgeon is, etc. And I think some people are possibly making the argument in respect of Sinn Féin now being the largest party in Northern Ireland. And I know Arlene has strongly disagreed with this point, but some people have suggested that there's now going to be a move towards a united Ireland. Northern Ireland's no longer going to be part of Britain. And in Wales, too, a similar kind of sentiment. And I think English people just kind of think, what about us? We don't have our own parliament. Our country is rarely mentioned in official documents. We're not allowed to celebrate our identity, even though we feel we do have an identity. And I think Peter Hitchens has tapped into that, and it's probably a right debate to be having at this moment in time.
I think something that I always find interesting about kind of English nationalism compared to elsewhere in the UK is often it's kind of associated with this sort of nasty kind of racist sentiment, which is completely false. But, we saw it, didn't we, a few years back when Emily Thornberry was out campaigning, saw Houses with England flags up and sort of made assumptions about what the people of that household must be like and what their views must be. How on earth do we try and break that view? Because there are, as you said, Paul, there are places in the country that throw great sort of St George's Day parades, as we saw in Morley, for example. And yet there is this sect that see an England flag and seem to kind of implode. What's going on?
I think George Orwell said, and I can't remember the exact quote, but he said words to the effect of, there's no intelligentsia in the world who hate their own country so much as the English intelligentsia. And I think that's perfectly true, actually. And I think it does derive from that kind of idea that England, as being the main country in the empire, has still got blood on its hands, and there's nothing to be proud of. And people who, for some reason, seem to want to find the bad in our history the whole time, rather than looking. And of course, the empire was a mixed bag. Let's be blunt. There were some terrible things done in the name of empire, but some good things as well. But I don't see any reason why we shouldn't celebrate the good things about our country. And it's not just the Scots and the Irish and the Welsh, but if you go across the world, most people have pride in their country. I mean, I was struck by the fact that when Keir Starmer gave a speech in front of the Union flag, parts of the left just absolutely hammered him as if he'd done something along the lines of a far-right politician. This kind of stuff is perfectly normal in France and Japan and places where people feel a collective sense of identity because they're part of the same political and cultural and economic unit. But for some reason, English people have been told, you have to quell any sense of Englishness because it's reactionary and it's wrong. And we've got, we're still soaked in blood from the 19th century. It's a nonsense, of course. And as I say, that's why I think that sense of Englishness exists beyond the professional and managerial classes, beyond the fashionable cities, and is much more prevalent out there in blue-collar provincial England.